Hello and welcome to the Week 4 team builder against the 14thDoctor and Chicago Beartics. My name is Scribbles. I am coach of the Colorado Cobalions. Just before we launch into the full team build, I wanted to go through kind of the general scouting report from the opposing team. So you can see all the members of his team just above me there. Kind of my initial thoughts here looking over the team. Speed tiers are a bit clumped together on the top. You've got Victini at 100, Frogadier at 97, Glycor Kiram at 95, 95, and then just kind of fairly evenly spread the rest of the way. So I don't think there's too much that I can take advantage of there with what I have. Zeraora can obviously run Adamant or Modest, but that's basically always the case. As far as the bulk for my opposing team, the opponent's team, it's pretty well balanced. There's not a good side to take advantage of between physical or special. And then from their attacking perspective, a lot more special attack, but there's definitely good physical attackers. So no huge weaknesses to kind of jump on immediately. Kind of diving over into like a bit of a type analysis. The balance on the team was pretty good, fairly weak to rocks, and no real good dark resistances. Other than that, Electric looks terrible against his team with 5 resists and 2 immunities. I guess 5 resists including 2 immunities. And against my team in particular, I don't really like Glycor. Glycor is hard to kill. I added Piloswine, which gives me an ice type, but Zeraora and Lando Eye losing Hidden Power Ice is quite frustrating, and I don't know why Zeraora didn't get Ice Punch. Everybody got Elemental Punches. Zeraora didn't get Ice Punch. It's quite sad, really. Going over to some of the basic comments. His team, as I said, it's kind of grouped up at the top. There's no really super fast Pokemon. So Trick Room could be a niche option with Victini being a setter and then just kind of abusing it. The other things that I've seen from the 14thDoctor in his matchups is lots of setup. Polteageist is pretty terrifying with the combination of Shell Smash, Weak Armor, and Stored Power. It can do a lot of work. It's already got 1 sweep on the season. I really don't want to be the second one in any case. Knockoff looks pretty good against him. He doesn't have a lot of dark resist, and losing items on any of his Pokemon can be frustrating. Specifically Glycor switching in and losing a Toxic Orb. Rotom losing any sort of Recovery Berry. Sylveon losing a Choice Specs. Victini is going to take super effective damage and possibly lose a Pandora Scarf. There's not really good switch-ins to knock off on the opponent's team, so that looked pretty good. Rocks are good because of all the weaknesses that his team has to rocks in general. He has a lot of ways to remove rocks with Ink, Glycor, Kiram, Rotom, Scizor. I think that's all that he has to remove rocks, but that's plenty. Looking at kind of the battle style I noticed from the 14thDoctor and the limited matches that I got to see, I actually went back and watched the championship match from, it was Larvitar last season, but I didn't get too much information. Lots of setup that could just be related to the team that he has, and slight preference towards prediction over kind of the conservative play. Nothing egregious. I think there's some players that are hyper aggressive, and I wouldn't classify the 14thDoctor as that from what I've seen, but he makes some predictions, and so something to keep an eye on when we're playing the game. As far as his team is concerned, the kind of immediate win cons I identified, Shell Smash Polteageist is terrifying. Dragon Dance Kiram is really good against my team. Sub Roost Kiram is also really good against my team. And then Calm Mind Victini or a Trick Room V-Create kind of set can be okay. Victini's not as big of a threat to my team in particular. So without going too much further in depth, let's just jump into the team. So starting off, I wanted to bring Life Orb Sheer Force Landorus because it's a really good Pokemon, but also because once I had Gravity up, Glycor is not the best from a special defensive standpoint. So I could get a lot of damage done, and it also really does a lot of work against Rotom, who is his other kind of... It's not a good switch into Landorus, but it is a potential switch into Landorus. You can always run rock coverage on Landorus to hit Rotom without Gravity. The main reason I ran Gravity is because I am a coward, and I didn't want to miss Focus Blast on Kyurem if the game came down to that. So there you go. The fourth move slot, Calm Mind, I went back and forth on a bunch of different options here. I had Knockoff, I had Stealth Rock. I think I even considered Sludge Wave for Sylveon. I ended up sticking with Calm Mind. It gave me a way to... I think this ensured that I could kill... I think it was Sylveon with Earth Power, but I could be wrong. The +1/+1 helped me for some calcs. I'm not really remembering them offhand, but we'll just kind of leave it at that. It's a pretty standard stat aside from Gravity and Calm Mind. Next up is Piloswine. So this is a new addition to the team, and I went with kind of a wild set for the first week. Max HP is fairly standard. If you're running Eviolite, maximizing HP is not necessarily the best thing to do, but it's really useful. Also gets you to with base 100 HP gets you to 404. So I don't know if he has anyone that would technically use Seismic Toss, but it's always nice to get up over 400 HP. I went with Max Special Attack Quiet Piloswine, so this helps me deal slightly with Trick Room if it comes out from my opponent. The reason I went with Max Modest is Freeze Dry hits Seismitoad really, really hard. It has a chance to KO offensive variants, and I don't die to any attack from Seismitoad. So in the event of a lead, Piloswine versus Seismitoad, I'm just going to click Freeze Dry, and more or less we're going to trade. And I'm going to be really happy with that trade, because Seismitoad's an issue for basically the rest of my team. Toxic on the set to just kind of get off status on an opposing team, specifically Rotom Heat, if it comes in to potentially remove rocks or something along those lines. Ice Shard is because Freeze Dry does not always OHKO Gliscor. It's really, really close. Offensive variants it does, the kind of standard, especially bulky variant, will survive, and I think I get a little bit of an element of surprise out of, special move into physical ice priority move. I also wanted something, I wanted as much priority as I could to finish off any sort of Focus Sash, Polteageist, or something along those lines. Next up is one of my main win cons for this game, brought to this week, Gyarados. This week we are using Aquaman themed characters. The DC Comics again, difficult for me to pull them. Not as easy as Marvel, but we've got some. So this is quote unquote Aquaman, or Aqua quote unquote man, because he's a fish, a terrible fish. Anyway, this particular set here, with the 152 HP investment and then 164 adamant, 192 speed. The speed means that at +2, I outspeed Scarf Victini. Well, it's supposed to. It actually speed ties with Scarf Victini. Oops. You gotta be careful when you do your calcs, ladies and gentlemen. So the goal was to outspeed Scarf Victini, who is the fastest Pokemon on the opposing team. At +2, it would speed tie with Scarf Victini, so whoops. And then the HP is enough HP to generally maintain a substitute against Seismitoad. I think everything but the rock attacks on a defensive Seismitoad won't break my substitute. And it's also a Life Orb number, so 369, and take 36 damage from Life Orb instead of 37, so, into 9 for your Life Orb calcs. And then the rest just dumped into attack. I went with Dragon Dance for setup, obviously, and substitute to avoid status and be able to set up on Seismitoad that isn't offensive. Waterfall is pretty obvious. And then I went with Iron Head because I don't have a good way of breaking through Sylveon, who really doesn't care about my substitute, to be perfectly honest. And it also gives me a way to break through Kyurem more easily. So obviously I could have used a Power Whip set or something along those lines, but I felt limited, and I didn't have much way to break Kyurem if I was a Power Whip set. Substitute, the reason I went with this particular Gyarados build is substitute blocks Strength Sap from Vileplume. So I can, in theory, set up on Vileplume if I can just substitute. Strength Sap will do nothing against a substitute. The next set is an AV Houndoom. modest max attack, max speed with a token amount in attack, and mild nature because with base 50 defense, I probably wasn't taking any attacks anyway. This set is a Poltergeist check with Sucker Punch, gives me some priority, super effective priority at that. And it also is a Victini check. Victini has a really tough time dealing a lot of damage to Houndoom. I think fighting coverage is probably its best bet. But any sort of choice lock set is going to be kind of terrorized by this particular Pokemon because it can't lock into either one of its stabs against Houndoom. Flame Charge allows me to outspeed 289 is 145, 430. That puts me faster than everything but Scarfers on his team. There's something in particular I invested for, but maybe not if I'm just sitting at 252, 252. Dark Pulse and Flamethrower, pretty standard. You could go for Fire Blast, but this wasn't meant to do lots of damage. It was just kind of meant to be a nuisance and pick up KOs when it could and when it had to. The next set here is Cobalion with an Aqua Berry, Ironhead Close Combat, Swords Dance, Magnet Rise. So I like this set a lot. A lot of his best ways to deal with Cobalion deal with his ground types. Specifically, I think Gliscor is a really good check to it. Seismitoad is a great check to it, which is why I really need to be able to deal with Seismitoad if at all possible. So any opportunity I get to smack that, I'm going to have to take. But this can set up on Gliscor. It will outspeed Gliscor. And it will be able to get up a Magnet Rise, and then Gliscor basically can't do anything to it. The defense that it has means that even flying attacks aren't going to do anything. It's going to just be neutral and bounce off more or less. Speed investment outspeeds Victini that's not Scarfed, so outspeeds Jolly or Timid Victini. Max attack, and then remainder jump in special defense. This is mostly to help me deal with Rotom. It doesn't really end up doing that much. The fighting coverage can hit most of his team, save Victini, realistically. So I kind of need Victini a bit weakened or out of the way, and Seismitoad out of the way before I can do much with Cobalion. But I think it does have a lot of chances to set up, and once it's set up, I think it can do a lot of work against the opponent's team. The final set for this week is Galarian Weezing. Fun investment here. This is my favorite set of the week. The HP is it maximizes recovery with Black Sludge while minimizing damage from Stealth Rock when I switch in, so it's a magic number, so to speak. The HP and special defense investment means that Spec Sylveon cannot 2-hit KO me with Hyper Voice. So from that, I will be able to have this as a switch into Sylveon. Sylveon won't be able to kill me, and this as a switch into Sylveon means I can get off free Pain Splits, free Will-O-Wisps. I can Sludge Wave Sylveon if Sylveon thinks it can pick up the KO. I also did a little bit of speed creeping to outspeed Sylveon if it's uninvested, so that in theory I could switch in on a Choice Specs Hyper Voice, take the damage, and then I could attack and then Pain Split when I still have some health. The only risk would be a quick attack or some set like that, but that's not guaranteed to kill me because of the resist and the amazing physical bulk that Galarian Weezing has. Will-O-Wisp is there. I'm not super worried about physical threats on his team. It's nice to hit Scizor. Mostly, I really want to catch Gliscor and prevent Toxic Orb from going off is kind of the goal of the set. Overall strategy for the team, kind of punch holes, more or less, with Lando. This is a pretty consistent strategy for the team. Punch a few holes with Lando, kind of slowly weaken the team, get rocks up, force my opponent to switch out and switch around a lot, and then get Gyarados or Cobalion in position once Seismitoad is weakened / eliminated, and just try and sweep from there. I can't be too aggressive with Houndoom, but I am willing to trade any of my other Pokemon realistically for damage on Seismitoad. So Landorus in against Seismitoad. If I'm not guaranteed to pick up the KO with Earth Power, and you would assume it has Ice Beam, I'm going to go ahead and fire off the Earth Power to get the damage off. So that's kind of the overall strategy of the team. We'll see how it works out for the battle. Alright, so we're here for the Week 4 battle, and the team, the 14th Doctor, ended up bringing, had basically all of the threats except Polteageist, and probably in its place is Vileplume. Vileplume serves as a really, really good check to a lot of my offensive threats, especially the physical threats. And unfortunately, Landorus doesn't get good flying coverage to help deal with that particular Pokemon, so it's a really logical bring. Kind of assessing the initial matchup, I'm really worried about Kyurem is a setup Pokemon. It has a lot of good options now that it's picked up Dragon Dance and some physical ice coverage that's not really bad. Aside from that, Victini, I really need to scout its item, figure out if it's choice locked in some way. If it's choice locked, it's a lot easier for me to play around. It could also be set up, which is concerning. As far as the rest of the team, I would assume one of Gliscor or Seismitoad is going to end up being the rocker. It's only two rockers. The important thing there being is that one of them is the rocker. The other one is free to either be an offensive set with setup or to run something a little bit more niche. So it's something to look out for what they end up running. Looking at the lead matchup, I went into it basically thinking there's no way I'm not going to lead Piloswine. I really, really want to try and catch one of Seismitoad or Gliscor turn 1, because if I can do that, it puts me in a really good position with the rest of my team. So I'm going to go ahead and lead off with Piloswine, and my opponent leads with Gliscor. So here, against Gliscor, an ice move's almost too obvious. So while Freeze Dry does more than they might be expecting from an Ice Skull Crash or an Ice Shard, the odds of them staying in here are really, really low. So I don't see a lot of value in kind of revealing my set. It's a really similar position for my opponent that I'm in. They look at Piloswine, Landorus, Cobalion. They probably assume Piloswine is the rocker and Landorus and Cobalion are up to other things. So I don't really want to reveal anything about my Piloswine set here, so I'm just going to go ahead and click Rocks. And my opponent hard switches out into Sylveon. So we've talked about this position before. Weezing's set up to deal with Sylveon. So I go ahead and pivot out into Weezing. My opponent goes for Hyper Voice. It does 48. This confirms its specs. This is exactly the kind of damage range that I was expecting from specs. I'm set up to, on another Hyper Voice, go down to a very low amount of HP, and then be prepared the following turn to Pain Split up. So here I'm really free to click whatever I want. The one risk in not Pain Splitting here is if this is a speed invested Sylveon, so it's like a purely offensive one, I can get burned quite a bit because I won't have time to recover. So I kind of get, I guess I get a little scared here. So I think the play I wanted to do was Will-O-Wisp here, but I didn't want to risk Sylveon being speed invested and not being able to recover up. So I just go ahead and click Pain Split. And my opponent ends up switching to Gliscor, and I regret it immediately because it's like you get really close to making those kind of those reads, those predictions to catch your opponent pivoting into something, especially Gliscor, who hasn't activated a Toxic Orb yet. It ends up not working out for me here. It would have been really nice to get the burn off on Gliscor to deny Toxic Orb, but it's okay. I think I have the tools to deal with Gliscor overall. So they get the Toxic Orb off, and I switch out to Gyarados. The reason I switch out to Gyarados is what I anticipated my opponent doing essentially was going for Rocks. Toxic, I don't think makes any sense in that particular position against a Poison type when I don't really have great switch-ins to Toxic. I don't think he's expecting me to go into Cobalion necessarily, Cobalion being weak to ground. I'm more or less not afraid of him going for an attack. I think the switch into Gliscor somewhat implies that this is his rocker, or his defogger, or it's serving some sort of utility role, because it's not ever going to threaten out Weezing, who's been revealed as Levitate. So it screams utility to me, which means I want to try and get Gyarados in before Rocks, and I want to try and get setup going if I possibly can. So my opponent reveals Rocks, and Gliscor is not Poison Heal. So 14th Doctor had a tough week. A lot of things going on for him. And I think he just clicked the wrong ability. So his Gliscor is not Poison Heal, which puts him in a really, really awkward spot. Toxic Orb without Poison Heal is obviously not where you want to be. In this particular position, I'm assuming that he is not speed invested as Gliscor. I'm assuming that he's kind of especially bulky set, at least HP invested. Probably has defense investment as well. I go ahead and fire off a substitute, assuming that I'll outspeed. I think a speedy Gliscor with Stealth Rocks is I just think this is a support set, is basically where I'm at this stage. I've kind of narrowed it down between his two rockers that this is the rock support set, and Seismitoad is probably the more offensive of the two. So go ahead and go for substitute, and the opponent uses Toxic, got behind a sub, and it kind of off to the races at this stage. This isn't the ideal time for me to set up Gyarados. Seismitoad's still healthy, Vileplume's still healthy, Victini's somewhat still healthy, but it does put my opponent in a slightly awkward position in that rocks are still up. So at worst, he'll have to take rocks damage and then a lot of damage from Gyarados as well, while trying to remove Gyarados. So this is free setup. I go ahead and go for it. I get to +1 and Vileplume comes in. So at this point, I'm doing calcs on Vileplume. I think it's a 2-hit KO, but I'm worried about Effect Spore. And I also am thinking that it can't break my substitute, and I'm thinking maybe 14th Doctor isn't aware of the substitute Strength Sap interaction. So I guess I get a little greedy here, and I go for another Dragon Dance. And it turns out that it doesn't need to be any offensive investment to break my sub with Sludge Bomb. It's kind of an oversight on my part. I really should have invested more. So I had substitute to deal with Vileplume Strength Sap, but I didn't invest in any special defense. I kind of assumed that Vileplume wouldn't be able to break my sub for whatever reason, and that ends up being a really poor assumption. So now I'm +2, which is good, and I know I can get a lot of damage off here with Iron Head, so I go ahead and go for that. It does a really good amount, 75%, and I get a flinch. This is huge. If he went for Strength Sap, it's kind of a 50-50, I guess, because for one, I could have been a bounce set. So I don't know if Vileplume is like the perfect switch in. I don't think he really has a switch in if I'm bounced. I think I just probably win if I have bounce. I guess you get double on bounces, so it's possible. If he went for Strength Sap there, I feel bad because he would have healed up and I would have been not strong enough to kill him from there. If he went for Sludge Bomb, it probably saved him a kill. It was huge. It was huge. So kind of a lucky streak for me continues. After the flinch, I can go ahead and kill Vileplume, so I'm going to go for that with the second Iron Head. And then from here, I'm at +3 and +2, and Seismitoad comes in. I'm assuming... So I've been talking about this as offensive, but I also think not bringing Water Absorb is a really interesting choice by my opponent. And I've set my Gyarados up to have the bulk to take a lot of attacks from a bulkier Seismitoad, a non-offensive Seismitoad. So I'm trying to kind of leverage the advantage I got from the flinch, and I go for a substitute, thinking that maybe it can't break my sub. Sludge Wave does break my sub, and he reveals to be Life Orb, so this is an offensive set. So at this point, I probably could have made a call here that he wasn't Water Absorb, but I didn't. I knew Sludge Bomb wouldn't kill me, and Iron Head would do a lot to Seismitoad. Or I knew Sludge Bomb would kill me, but Iron Head would weaken Seismitoad, and as I talked about in the team builder, weakening Seismitoad is huge to my game plan. So I get the damage off on Seismitoad, and Gyarados goes down. And in the chat, he reveals that he was Water Absorb. So I bring in Cobalion, because Cobalion is the only thing that for sure kills this, I think. Not now that it's revealed to be offensive, it's a little bit sketchier, and I don't want to take damage on Houndoom. Cobalion was also the only thing that didn't allow something terrifying in immediately after, so I kind of had to think about that too. It was a really awkward position. I don't like the Cobalion play, but I think everything else was worse. So bringing Cobalion, he gets his first kill. And now my opponent is forced to pivot into Gliscor. I think this is interesting. It might have been an attempt just to get health back. I think offensively, I could have been really, really threatened by a lot of things that my opponent went into in this particular position. I don't think Gliscor gained a ton of momentum. But I go ahead and pivot out into Wheezing because I have Levitate, and Gliscor gets the Roost off, gets a little bit of health, and in this position, he doesn't have a great switch into Fairy attack anymore. Victini can switch in, but it takes a lot of damage from rocks and then the attack as well. So I just start launching off attacks. And again, it's been a long week for 14th Doctor. He Earthquakes into Levitate, Wheezing, and ends up switching out to Kyurem. So actually Sludge Wave trying to catch Sylveon or Victini. Strange Team didn't really do that much more damage anyway. So another Sludge Wave into Kyurem does 22. And he's left over, so it might be like a sub-roost set. I just start using Strange Steam. I'm willing to trade at this point. I'm up a mon, so every trade is good for me. I end up taking down Kyurem with Strange Steam. Wheezing's down to 30%. And Victini comes in. So in this position, Victini's doesn't actually have that bad of a matchup. If you look at the mons I have left, I have 2 mons that are weak to fire, and then I have Wheezing who's low, and then Landorus who doesn't have the best bulk. So a banded V-Create set or something like that can start to do a lot of work if Houndoom's removed. In this position, I don't actually need Houndoom for a lot. It doesn't really beat Gliscor or Sylveon very well. So I'm willing to just throw Houndoom out here because it forces Victini to either use U-turn and just take unnecessary damage or lock into something really suboptimal. It's going to be tough for him to click a ground move in this position if he has some sort of ground coverage or something like that. A fighting move is going to be even more difficult because I quad resist it with the mon I have in now. So Houndoom felt like a really safe switch. I go into Houndoom and opponent launches off V-Create, and now I have a Flash Fire boosted Houndoom that is AV, so I'm essentially calm-minded Houndoom, and my opponent is forced to switch, so this is a really good position. I suppose I could have Flame Charged here, but the only thing I really gain out of a Flame Charge, if he's Scarfed, is nothing, basically. So I just click Dark Pulse, trying to get neutral damage off, or maybe kill Victini if he's not Scarfed in some way or choiced in some way. So that kills Gliscor. Sylveon comes in, and I think this is the funniest part of the whole match. Spec Sylveon should demolish Houndoom with Hyper Voice. So I get Flamethrower, which is Flash Fire boosted. I survive Hyper Voice, and I get another Flamethrower off. So Houndoom actually 1v1 Sylveon from that position. And then on top of it, I Sucker Punch and almost kill Victini. If I'd killed Victini there, that would have been really, really satisfying for me, I guess. I don't. And the classy finish from 14th Doctor with the final gambit to pick up the last kill. Good game to 14th Doctor. Had a really convoluted week from what I understand, so that's always tough. And then getting the raw end of kind of some of the luck in the match is never, ever fun. And I feel like I've been running pretty hot lately on that side of things. The last 2 matches, I think I had a few breaks in my favor for sure. So hopefully can kind of turn that around and win on merit going forward. This brings us to 4-0 with a +8 differential, so we're not kind of just scraping by, winning everything 1-0, 1-0, 1-0.